Hi, I'm Exo, and it's been a while since we've caught up. So here's what we've been up to in the last few months over at the Exo projects. In December, we released Exodos version 6.04. We have deprecated the updater that was built into Exodos due to difficulty with hosting. So, to update, simply go to the website, retro-exo.com, download the torrent, and point it to your existing Exodos installation. It will replace the files that you currently have. Run setup again, it'll extract those files, and you're good to go. If you've got a merge setup or anything like that, it will not mess with that. You'll be fine. Within the next couple days here, next week or so, I'll be releasing ExoScummVM 2.9.0. This is based on the most recent ScummVM release. There are quite a few new games added, including several AGS games, the Spacebar, several Director games. There's a complete list coming up on the Discord channel, and I'm also doing a video specifically about this release coming up with the release of the project. One of the cooler things about it is I've leveraged the framework that I wrote for the Exo Dream pack for the ExoScummVM pack, and what that means is, whereas before I had hard-coded menus that would have to change every time I added a new game or a new platform. Now those are dynamically read by the folder structure, so the menus are all dynamic. It's pretty neat. It makes it a lot easier to maintain, and it adds consistency to the entire pack now. When you're playing it, when you're going through the menus, it's going to look the same on every game, instead of being different depending on who or when we made the pack. There are several projects that are in the beginning phases. We have ExoBBS, which is based on BBS door games. For that, I have created a structure that creates something called a drop file. So back in the day, first of all, a BBS was a bulletin board system. You would dial into it using your modem. It was like pre-internet days. Typically, most BBSs only had one phone line. Fancy ones had two. Super fancy paid ones had more. If you had two or more lines, you could chat with people, but mostly you left messages behind on the forums. People would leave messages back to you. For me, as a 12-year-old at the time, I loved the door games. And a door game was basically a online game, turn-based, and you would log in, play your turn. You had so many turns per day you could play in most of these games. And then you had to wait till midnight to play again. And other people could then come play all day. And so, like, a quintessential game for this was Legend of the Red Dragon by Seth Robinson. It was a fantasy-based game. You could create a warrior or a thief. I think there were different classes. At least there were in later releases. May not have been up front. And then you would go in the forest and you would search for bad guys. And there was a couple bad guys per level. Depending as you leveled up, the bad guys leveled up. You would get gold. You would then take the gold and buy armor and weapons. And this built up. After you had your 15 forest fights of the day or more, if your sysop had registered and had increased the number, you could go to the tavern and hit on Violet the barkeep. You could get a room for the night, which would protect you. If you weren't in a room, people could attack you when you were offline, and they could take your gold, take your stuff. The goal was to get up to, I think, level 15 and be the first person to kill the red dragon. At which point, the sysop, or whoever's running the game, could choose to restart the game, and you kind of started over again. And it was kind of a race. With that said, that explanation out there, a key thing here was called a drop file. There were different softwares that ran bulletin board systems. And so each one communicated differently. And they would have to write all of your personal information when you logged in to a file called a drop file, which the door game would then read. And that told it what node you were on, what your username was, how much time you were allowed to be on. Because say you only got 30 minutes a day on this bulletin board, you had to tell the door game that. Because the door game, the BBS wasn't in memory anymore. It was passing things off to the door game to run for you. So the door game had to pick up how much time you had left. If you logged in with 5 minutes left, the door game needed to kick you out. Otherwise, you could squat on that phone line until you left the game. Anyway, there was quite a bit of information. Sorry, I had a cat in here earlier and he was all over me. I'm covered in cat hair now. I can feel it on my face, on my nose. Um, ExoBBS is going to be really interesting, I think, especially for anyone who grew up with them or is interested in them. By creating a drop file on the fly using a framework that I built, you can either create multiple users yourself, or you and other people who play locally can all create users and play against each other. It allows you to enjoy these BBS door games in an actual multiplayer environment versus the few that I currently have already in Exodos that are currently playing in local mode or sysop mode, which basically means you can play it, you can work through it, but there's nobody else to play with. And these games just aren't nearly as fun without other people. Now, ultimately, I would love to find a way to host them on like some kind of Exo telnet where everyone that's part of the community could play together. But right now, the goal is to preserve them, get them running, and make it so that they are playable in a multiplayer fashion and not just in local mode. I've also got the very, very beginnings going of a virtual pinball collection. This came about because I didn't realize, having not really played many virtual pinball tables in the past, what a chore it was to get them running. Apparently, new versions of virtual pinball or future pinball aren't compatible with every single table that's been written so far. So you kind of have this, certain versions of the virtual pinball go with certain versions of the tables, go with certain versions of future pinball, and that's exactly what my projects are good at doing. Going back to ScummVM for a moment, 2.9.0 cannot play every game that we've ever added. They drop support sometimes, they deprecate sometimes. Features that work great in 2.3 don't work great anymore. Or maybe, I think it's 2.3 has several Mac versions that ran great. They ran great. There was no problem with them. I mean, there might have been some, small bugs here and there, but for the most part, we're talking 90 to 95% emulation. And now they're gone. They don't start at all. They're not even recognized anymore by the more recent versions of Scum. So my framework handles the idea of multiple versions of a single emulator, and each one's assigned to a different table in this case, or a ROM or game in the case of ScummVM, or even Exodos, which is juggling like a dozen different versions of DOSBox to run all the games. The newest addition to the cadre of Exo projects is EXoIF, Interactive Fiction. This has a long history with me. Way back when I was on Exodos version 2 or 3, I got the idea of doing an interactive fiction bundle. And this was because at the time I was adding interactive fiction games to Exodos. But there were so many that were just Z code or designed to be read by an interpreter. And for Exodos, they really needed to be a DOS version of the game. So it became difficult to figure out which one should go in versus which one shouldn't. And I felt like I was leaving a lot of great content on the floor. Fast forward, and while working on eXoScummVM 2.9.0, they have now added support for GLK, which is an interpreter that runs a multitude of interactive fiction games. Unfortunately, ScummVM, in my experience so far, does not run them very well. The text is distorted. It's not easy to read. It's not an optimal way to play these games. So I was talking with one of the users on the board who happens to be very well versed in Infocom. His username is G. Schmidl. And we started tossing around the idea of resurrecting the EXoIF project that I had started years ago and never really got moving. But now using the same framework that I'm using in EXoDream and eXoScummVM, where we can create menus with the subfolders, and the launcher can read those menus and say, oh, okay, so you want to play Zork. Well, do you want to play it using WinFrot? Do you want to play it using Electrote? Do you want to play it in the original MS-DOS form? With the Magnetic Scrolls games, we have it loading in original DOS, Magnetic, which is an interpreter for Magnetic Scrolls games, but while this text looks great, it doesn't have a lot of the features that the original versions had. For example, Wonderland is this really amazing interactive fiction game based on Alice in Wonderland. And it looks almost like a Macintosh screen when you start it up. You have windows. You have your window for your text where you can type and interact with the game. You've got a window. If you've played Deja Vu or Shadowgate, you've got a window for your map. You've got a window for your compass. You've got one for your inventory, one for the interactive objects on the screen. And what was really cool about Magnetic Scrolls games is there were images. And sometimes music too. So you can have the image, the inventory, all these windows opened up and tidy, and you can play with it all there. Magnetic doesn't do that. So we added the DOS version so you had access to that stuff. And then we realized, thanks to John Novak from the DOSBox staging project, that the Amiga versions were the original versions, and the DOS versions were dithered down and distorted when it comes to the graphics. So we added the Amiga versions of these games. So right now you can play Amiga, you can play DOS, you can play Magnetic, or through DOS, the Magnetic Scrolls collection, which added the mapping systems to several older games like Fish, Corruption, and Guild of Thieves. In Zork, we have the little-known Sega Saturn version. It's crazy. It's graphical, but you still have to type to get through it. It's got graphics and screens. It's in Japanese, so good luck. But it's there because this is a comprehensive collection of interactive fiction games. I'm calling it Games First. In other words, Exodos is DOS games. EXoScummVM is ScummVM games. These are platform-specific projects. EXoIF is not platform-based. It is game-based. So when we add a game like Zork to it, we're not saying you have to play it using a specific methodology. We're adding multiple emulators, multiple interpreters, so that you can experience the game multiple ways, any way, one way. It's up to you. And it's possible to do that with IF because we're talking pretty small files here. I'm pretty sure that the Saturn version of Zork is going to single-handedly be larger than almost every other game in the pack because we're talking 8 kilobyte, 20 kilobyte files here for the most part. So it'll be a lot of games, but very compact and easy to transport, easy to download. Now, for our first pass, we are doing commercial games only. We're not getting into trying to download the entire, BAFS guide, or there are multiple repositories online of interactive fiction games. And we're not trying to download all of them and present them all. Not at first. Round one is going to be commercial games. Now, one of the great things about my partner on the project, G. Schmidl, is he has a multitude of really cool resources. Interviews with developers like Steve Moretsky or Bob Bates, game design documents, all kinds of cool stuff that adds context to these games, beyond just the fact that the game is there. And then for round two, once we get this one out, we will go back and start adding like the best of the best. So there are interactive fiction competitions. We'll go get the top winners of each year and add them in. We will go back and find, here's the top 100 list of games that came out over whatever time period. We'll get those in there. And then, of course, there will be community suggestions. We already have a channel on the Discord for discussing this project. And I think if it's not there yet, it'll be there by tonight. A game submission channel where people can come in and say, hey, what about this one? What about that one? Now, to be clear, EXoIF is defined as a game that you control using the parser. So it gets a little cloudy. Early Sierra games like High Res Adventure and Mystery House, those count. King's Quest 1 through 4, while the AGI engine is parser based, you're controlling your character using the arrow keys a lot of times. That's more direct control of the character, so that falls out of scope of interactive fiction. we're not doing this because we don't like King's Quest or because we're trying to segregate the games. We're doing it because we have to have a defined endpoint. Otherwise, I mean, the term interactive fiction, anytime you're reading something and making a choice, well, that's fiction, and you're interacting with it because you made a choice. So for the purpose of the game, we are, trying to keep it in that world of Infocom. Now, there are games like Legend, Spellcasting 101, Eric the Unready, Frederick Pohl's Gateway. These are clearly interactive fiction games that have a graphical component to them. They're in. This will continue getting more defined as we move forward. I am very excited about the project. It's pretty much all I've worked on this week, and it's running great at this point. My partner has been adding games to it and lots of extras. I don't think we're going to be all that far off from a release on it. It's a nice compact thing that we can do, I'd say a few months. It should get us in a pretty good place. Finally, my focus this year, in between juggling ScummVM and BBS and virtual pinball and interactive fiction, and of course Apple II, which has been in the works for a while, and AppleIIGS. My main focus this year is Exo Windows 3X. I am very lucky right now that one of my main partners in the project, Python, has been very active in going through and helping me convert the templates for the existing games over to the newest version of Staging. I'm very lucky that the folks over at Staging have taken a very large interest in the Win3X pack, and they've gone back and looked at dead versions of DOSBox like DOM that hasn't been touched since 2015 and found, well, what was it in DOM that made it so much better at handling a Win3X game than something like ECE in 2022 where it still didn't work? They have isolated those issues and brought them into Staging. On top of that, we have a user over on the Discord. She has her own YouTube channel and does all kinds of playthroughs of all kinds of games, mainly adventure games and educational type stuff. She goes by the handle Rizulka. I apologize if I pronounced it wrong. You read and type it all day long. You don't have to say it. So in my mind, when I read it, I say Rizulka. If that is incorrect, then I'll fix it next video. She has added nearly 70 games just in the past few months, and she's one of the most qualified people to do it as her channel focuses on this type of software. So she was already going and making these games work for herself so she could play them for her channel. The fact that she's now putting that time into the Exo project, we are all very lucky because of that. And then I'm coming in on the back right now and updating all the framework because things have changed a tremendous amount since the last time there was an Exo Win3X release. So bringing it up to speed, converting old games to new versions of DOSBox, cleaning them up, making them work better, making them work faster, making them work more consistent. Because some of them just, they start 3 times fine, then the 4th time they don't want to anymore. It's Win3X. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to fix it. That's what we're going to do. And apart from finally just getting it up to speed and up to date, we have a tremendous amount of software that is not currently preserved anywhere. It's not on archive.org. It's not cataloged on Moby Games. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, one of our users, Peric, on the forums, he's one of our staff members, he went all over his local city picking up software. And I actually have a ton of it behind me right now. I had trash bags of it he brought to me. We have, this one's got a keyboard inside. I have no idea how I'm going to emulate that. You actually place the keyboard on top of your computer keyboard. And I guess it, it lines up with your F keys or something. Anyway, there's that. We got, now this one's a known one. Don't Quit Your Day Job. It's a mature FMV game, comedy. Lots of cleavage, and that's what makes it mature. I doubt there's any nudity in this game. Here we go. We got Jurassic Dinosaurs. The perfect talking electronic book for children. Here's Danny the dinosaur. There's a theme going on right here. There's Danny. Now, this is a good example. educational games are underrepresented when it comes to preservation. They don't get cataloged on sites like Moby Games. They tend to fly under the radar. People just don't care about them. And yet, they tend to be what many people are most nostalgic for because that's what they grew up playing. This is wow. It's based on a book by Sid Hoff from 1958. An I Can Read book. So I did not realize Danny the Dinosaur is an actual IP from the 50s. And then this came out in 97 here. And sure enough, Win3X, SVGA 640 by 480. It's got a match game, word games, and spelling games. We got Frog and Toad. They're making a comeback right now. Every time I go to Target, there's Frog and Toad shirts up there. But then we also have a ton of weird stuff. Like the WordPerfect 7 upgrade. I assume we have to have 6 to upgrade it. Works with CorelDRAW, Ventura, Office Professional. Now, this brings up a question. Are we going to include productivity software in Win3X? We already have some. We have screensavers. We have things that are entertainment. Will I add this? I think we're heading that way. I think we're heading to the direction of having Win3X actually have a decent amount of application software. However, I will probably split it off so that you don't have to download it. Not everyone wants it. But I have been surprised by how many people do request it. Here we have, go figure, the problem-solving toolkit for business, home, school, and everywhere. I mean, if you have everywhere, do you need to specify the other 3? I don't know what this is, honestly. It is, well, over here, it's got a budget and budget items, completion dates, the volume of a pyramid. So in case you're calculating your geometry on your computer in Win3X, you can calculate a volume of a pyramid. How many limestone blocks would you need to build the pyramid with that volume? That's kind of cool. What would the labor cost be? Oh, this whole thing goes into building a pyramid. It's Pharaoh's Challenge. It says problem description. Build a pyramid 10 meters high and 200 square meters at its base. Your budget is $20,000. I'm assuming dollars. It doesn't have a unit. A 5 cubic meter limestone block costs $94.50, and a day of labor costs $50. So you have to solve that. John Dvorak, noted technology columnist, says, it's a permanent tool in my computer. That'll go in, for sure. That's cool. I love how random it is. We got a few more here that I'll talk about since they're sitting right behind me. Sitting on the Farm, which is a... why are there so many farm CD-ROMs? Like, I swear there's a dozen to 2 dozen. There's so many of them. Here we have America's greatest state parks with a Kodak VHS tape goes along with it. That way, if you get tired of watching the small QuickTime video of Arches National Park, you can just pop that bad boy in your VCR that we all have still. You know, here's the stupid thing about this. To properly preserve this, I'm going to have to stick this in my VCR that I have connected to my computer and rip it to video and put it in the extra so that you can watch the bloody Yellowstone National... Oh, it's Yellowstone, not Arches. It'll be there. I'll put the Yellowstone tape with this when we release it. And maybe one of you will watch it. And I'll spend way too much time recording that video. I mean, digitizing that video than it was worth. But, hey, it was part of it. Here we have Basics and Beyond. The complete interactive guide to multimedia computers. Explore over 1,000 computer topics. 500 high-quality graphic images. Hot button disk navigation. Yeah, so it's like Encarta, but about really ancient computers. That is the contents of about 1/4 of a trash bag, and I probably got 20 trash bags worth of software sitting here. And that's only stuff that we have in actual shrink wrap boxes. In the project Dropbox that we use, I cannot even guess how many pieces of software we have that are already imaged and already scanned, but not currently in any project online. You can Google these things and they do not come up. They are not stored anywhere. They're not preserved anywhere. So EXO-Win3X really needs to be a priority. Exodos, we're at a point of like 98, 99% preservation when it comes to commercial releases. We're primarily adding new stuff people are adding, and occasionally we're finding a game that someone has found that was lost to time until now. So those are always very important to add, but the amount of good we can do in adding hundreds of unpreserved Win3X games is hard to quantify. That is where we currently are in the Exo projects. We are always open for business on the Discord. You can drop by, chat with me. I'm probably ranting about something like today. My rant was about how Ken Williams made really bad 3D games. Like, what is that talking about? Oh, Gabriel Knight 3. I made a joke how the graphics upset me, and that turned into a half-hour discussion with people about, did it matter? Were adventure games dying anyway? There's always something fun to talk about, though, and it's always in good fun. Nobody's yelling at you, telling you that Ken Williams sucked. I have a lot of respect for the guy. I think he made some questionable business decisions at one point. But hey, who doesn't? He was on top of the game for a while there, so he cashed out. He did well for himself. I love talking about this kind of stuff, so please drop on by and talk with me. And if it's not me, there's plenty of other people that are very knowledgeable and very helpful and very happy to have new folks over. I think it's worth mentioning that G. Schmidl, Razulka, Python, Parrot, just a couple people I've mentioned today. There's so many more. And another guy, Dutch Magic, recently joined, and he released the EXoDemoScene project. It's an amazing project full of all kinds of very difficult to run demo scene. People have asked me about demo scene content for over a decade. It felt out of control to try to tame that and make something usable out of it. Someone else came along and did it. So not only is the Exodos community, Exo community, full of fun, knowledgeable people, I am constantly impressed by how many people step up and jump in and say, hey, I got this. I want to help make this. I want to help make that. Or what if we did this? What if we did that? There's no way one person, I know it says Exo on the door, but these are not Exo projects anymore. Like, Exo is no longer me. It's a community of people. And I'm very grateful to them because everything in quality is so much higher than it would be if it was just me working on it. So, thank you for watching. Thanks for following along. And I look forward to getting all these projects out to you. In the meantime, I've also been recording a lot of YouTube content. It just isn't ready yet. There's one particular video that I've been working on for almost a year now. But it's my biggest video. It's a full breakdown of the Space Venture Kickstarter. It's got interviews. It's got breakdowns. It's an actual edited video. It's not just me sitting here talking to a camera. It looks like the cool ones that people upload that have like lots of views on them where they like, the narrator's in the background. You don't see him. You know, he's talking. But it's like a real video. I'm like, like a real YouTuber makes. Not just a guy in his office sitting in front of a camera talking to you. Again, thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Take care.